Ukraine's second front. That's how the country's fight against corruption has been described by historian Anne Applebaum. We'll look at her article in Slate magazine here on the Press Review. She says that the downturn in fighting in East Ukraine means the country now has an opportunity to make some progress. Russia has not fulfilled the terms of the peace deal signed earlier this year, but nevertheless, the Russians have turned, at least temporarily, from Ukraine to Syria, and thus the fighting has stopped. There is now a breathing space, and it is one that the Ukrainian government should use to fight its second war, the one against systemic corruption. Applebaum goes on to share with us some of her first-hand experience of the fight against corruption in Ukraine. She says that that battle and the one in East Ukraine essentially come down to the same thing. She writes, "In a real sense, the two battles are the same. Russia has long manipulated Ukrainian politics, both subtly and openly, buying politicians, corrupting gas deals, and perverting business. In 2006, I sat in a splendid gilded room with Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko and listened as he told me that the Orange Revolution, Ukraine's first attempt to throw off its corrupt leadership, was failing thanks to Russian pressure, and why it wasn't his fault." Applebaum details further plans to fight corruption in Ukraine, such as Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk's goal to fire all 9,000 of the country's judges and rehire only the ones with clean records. But she says such top-down action is not enough, and more needs to come from civil society, although, as recent local elections have shown, there are problems there too. She writes, "The fight against corruption also requires cultural change, even moral change, and that can't come only from the top. The mayor of Lviv in western Ukraine has forged a successful political movement around the idea that the war on corruption begins at the very lowest levels of local government. But elsewhere in the country, local elections were marred by voters selling their votes, a sure sign that cynicism begins at the bottom too." Applebaum applauds Prime Minister Yatsenyuk for his work and sounds a note of praise, but at the same time appears to understand that time is running out for him, especially in light of the fact that she believes hostilities in East Ukraine could pick up again. She writes, "The stakes could not be higher. Soon the fighting will begin again. The political climate will worsen. The patience of foreign donors will run out. And if the war on corruption is lost, then the war for Ukraine's sovereignty will be lost too." Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, according to Applebaum, admitted that he hasn't been able to do a lot to stop the sorts of petty corruption at schools and hospitals which affect most people's everyday lives. That surely is the next step in Ukraine's grand reform program if it is to make progress towards winning the war on the second front. That's all we have time for today. Join us again tomorrow for another edition. In Kiev, this is Ukraine Today.